Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scousers Morning Coffee or Tea with American Scouser. It's Monday. You guessed it. Grumpy is here with all his glory. And yes, it is definitely a grumpy morning. Matush is still half asleep. He's relegating Poland from the Euros. I gather things did not go well. I did not see anything.
When you lose 2-0 to Albania and pretty much dash your hopes of qualifying in a group with Albania, you don't deserve to be anywhere but not there. Anywhere but there.
Turkey blew a game that they should have easily won. They kind of like barely scraped a draw at home against Armenia, which they should have been prepared for. Armenia beat Wales actually away. But yeah, we just don't have a striker. We can't. I don't understand how out of in a club team, you can understand why somebody plays out of position, right? The depth is so much. The depth is the country. So how we don't have a left back and we have to play a guy who doesn't play left back as left back, I do not understand. Or we don't have a striker, so we have to play a winger as a striker. The Turkish depth, definitely. FSG out. The depth in Turkey is not good.
You're telling me, Poland is so obsessed with the sport, and the fact they can't find 11 guys good enough to compete is just laughable. But hey, we've got an old aging striker that disappears in tournaments, so we can send you him, and then you can send us, I don't know, maybe a right back.
We got right backs. I'll send you a right back. Let's do this. Let's do a trade between Poland and it's Turkey, by the way. I keep saying Turkey, and you do not correct me. And God knows nobody else is to correct me. So we're in shambles over here. Yes, I do apologize. It is Turkey. Somebody, buddy of mine, was like, "Dude, you keep saying Turkey," and I was like, "Yes, I do. It's just old habits die hard." And I'm old, damn it. You're old when you wake up with a hip pain. You have no idea how you got. While you're sleeping, I assume, but that's a totally different story. Headlines. We should find some headlines, right, to talk about. The news media is struggling to find headlines. I do have some that we can go over to the point where I wanted to share this when I looked for Premier League news headlines. This literally is from 28 minutes ago. NBC Sports says the Premier League winter transfer window is already fast approaching as teams focus on who they need to add or subtract on September 11th. And then when you go in, it says it starts on January 1st. So the interns are really, really struggling to find news. So
it just never ends. It never ends.
Really it does not. I think they realize they're like, dude, we're putting actual news. It's not getting clips. So let's find transfer news was doing so well, kind of a thing. And they put another transfer one on. Oh, actually, this one is a good one that we can kind of touch on. The Spanish FA presidents finally quits. It's almost like they had to tear his like statue down, like a dictator going out, kind of a thing. I don't understand how he was still there anyway. Any comments on that whole ordeal? I think we touched up on it on one of the morning shows, but
yeah, he should have been ousted earlier, but I'm glad that finally came to that point where that happened, because it seemed like it wasn't going to happen. And then you started to see all of the support, and not for him, obviously. And I think then you saw his mom locking herself up and going into a hunger strike.
Really? I missed this part.
Yeah, no. His mom locked herself up and said that she's not going to come out. She's not going to eat or drink until all this stops, because her son is innocent. He's not a monster, blah, 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 blah. And then she actually had to be hospitalized, because she
look at Polish, like a reporter, man, like reporting live from Spain. Hey, Polish Prince.
I'm really hoping this is what happened, because if I just dreamt this, I'm gonna be mad. So no, yeah, I'm glad it finally came to an end. It doesn't end there though, right? This is one thing where we can be happy that this happened, but there has to be something that actually gets put in place, or something that gets done that prevents this from happening the next time. Because there's a revolving door when it comes to harmful situations if you don't find ways to take care of it, right? You're not closing the door all the way. You're just sort of just leaving it a little bit open, thinking that you closed it, and then you turn your back and then someone swings the door wide open. And so I think there's got to be some steps taken to make sure that that this doesn't have to happen again, hopefully.
And I think people who are unfamiliar with the entire story is, it was almost presented in general media where it was just a kiss, but there's a lot more to it. And I think that's what people are not kind of like, if you're looking at the story from totally outside, not inside over there, looking at like the mom's hospital report and stuff like that. You're like, you have like the clipboard in your hand. You're like, what is the patient up to this morning? But yeah, if you're not, it was a lot more than that. That was almost like the final layer, if you will, more than anything else. And obviously, if something like that happens in the eyes of the world, if you will, it's God knows what was happening behind the scenes. Perfect for him to do an interview with Piers
Ugh.
Morgan. Tells you all you need stuff. I don't understand. I think there's a huge needs in the PR worlds that we should answer, because anybody could have come up to me and I'd be like, no, not him. If you guys want to do an interview, get your story out. That is not the place to do it, kind of a thing. And then let me tell you why. I don't understand how some of these things happening. You look at some of the messes around the world of sports. It's like, where have all the good PR companies gone, is what makes you think. But let's get to some of our boys' news. This came in right on our way out on Friday. The punishment is in. 1 game for Van Dijk. I mean, obviously 0 is better than 1, but it's as good as it can get, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And especially when we were fearful that it might be 3 to 4 games. Then that could have been a little bit more disastrous. But it's a great response from Virgil. It's now time to dominate the league. Like it's a good feeling. I think he handled it very maturely. Obviously, you don't want your captain to necessarily blow up the way that he did often. Every once in a while I get out of passion, out of just the adrenaline that's going through you, especially that early on in the game. I feel like there's still so many emotions that are going through, so it's tough to necessarily sometimes to wither that down. But yeah, I think overall couldn't have asked for a better punishment, so to speak. Because if it was any worse, I think we'd be reeling a little bit. But yeah, it's time to he took it on the chin, and he's ready to go. So it's good to see.
Yeah, I think 0 was out of the question after like everything
Yeah.
that we saw. So this is as good as it can get. He adds, it was a red card anyway. I've never got one before at Liverpool, and I think I only about 4 times in my entire career. But apart from that, I still started the season well in the 20. And what do you say to that? I feel like, yes, compared to last year, he's definitely been better. I mean, we never expect him to go back and turn back the clock 4 years or something like that, but he had started the season a lot better than how he ended it.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess we dominated without him against Villa. So who needs Van Dijk anyway, right? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, when we compare anything to last year, I think we'll see a lot of improvements just because last year was just such a difficult year all around. But there are still some question marks at the back, and still some things that need to be ironed out. And hopefully, maybe taking this a little extra time off is going to be exactly what he needs. But yeah, it's. I think he's played okay. I don't know if I necessarily go well. I like a solid 5 to 6.5 out of 10 for the season so far. But in my head, I'm thinking he's played well. He's thinking of himself as an 8 or 9 out of 10 in a way. I guess
yeah, definitely not that well. I mean, obviously, the
Yeah.
old Van Dijk does not even get a red card. Like I've always said that. I mean, the old Van Dijk probably just
He plays it
shoulders
differently.
his sock
Yeah.
and they kind of like walk hand in hand towards the corner flag over there, and he does not make that tackle in. But compared to, I think maybe what we feared after coming back from the injury, and it was natural for it to take a bit longer coming from that injury. Just playing and playing well are 2 different things. Yeah, I thought it was definitely a step in the right direction for him. This gives him a mini break. Like Chris says, the Wolves game is not a big miss. Does this kind of ease the worries of center back situation that we had when we were wishing for a center back move before the window ended? Which don't fear, because NBC says the other one is right around the corner. Yeah, it's coming soon. So
before we know it, our Christmas present's going to be a big old center back. No, because even before any of this, we still said that we needed a left-footed center back just to kind of to make this system make a little bit more sense, and to have your potential replacement on that side. Because if Konate is the guy on the right side, and given his injury track record, you still needed someone on the left. And I know there's the comments of, well, Van Dijk could learn to play like Thiago Silva, where as he ages, he changes how he plays, but still understands the game really well and is still able to read the game really well, just because he's naturally he's a great IQ kind of guy. But if he's not going to necessarily go that direction, you're going to need someone to replace him. And we might fall in the same boat with Fabinho, where we didn't have his successor lined up. And I think I know it's easier said than done, because if you want someone that you feel is good enough to be the successor to Virgil van Dijk, that player is going to feel like he should be getting 90 minutes, and he might not want to sit on the bench at Liverpool if he can be getting 38 starts for another team in the Premier League. So it's sort of it's in a weird way like a catch-22, because you want enough talent and quality, but that kind of quality and talent might not necessarily want to come off the bench. It's your scenario with your kid. He wants to either go to the Fulham, right, and be a regular starter, or he goes to Liverpool, but he gets off the bench maybe 15 times the whole year. What do you do? And everyone's a little bit different, so maybe you do find that center back that's willing to kind of to bet in and take a year or so to really wait for his chance. But yeah, I think overall there still needs to be one that comes in at some point, unless we want to just absolutely drive Virgil to the ground over the next 6 years.
Yeah, the left-handed side is, I guess, the concern. I mean, obviously, you can always switch and play there, but it's the same as people don't realize that, it's still in the center, but it's still like a right back playing a left back. Not as extreme, because I guess you're not pushing up and to cross the ball and stuff like that. But it's still tricky to, you have to take different angles and stuff like that. That's another thing. If you played on the right-hand side and you used to taking a certain angle when a player is coming at you, it is a big adjustment. And honestly, in some ways, you would think a more experienced player would be able to adjust better, but it's usually the opposite. The younger guy can adjust better because the other stuff is not as built into his system as like the older guy. But yeah, I think it definitely kind of like takes care of the worries, because my biggest fear was with the games coming in thick and fast now, because the Europa is starting. I was really worried that if he's not able to play a lot of games, I know he could have played the Europa games and stuff like that. But with Konate's situation, not 100%, you don't know how well he's going to come, if he's going to able to come back right away. Being available and playing are different things. And then, if you're down to two, you're constantly playing the same two game after game after game. You don't want to do that with Gomez and Matip. So that was part of the kind of my concern. So one game definitely eases the worries over there. So I'll take it and run with it. Serzi says a president now. Hopefully Penandes gets punished now when he decides to wrestle the referee. And I think that was kind of like our thing, where even some of the decisions we always kind of look at it as to, well, that didn't happen there and stuff like that, when he just literally pushed the AR out of the way. But I think we can all agree that you watch that and one game is kind of running away with it feels like. So I'll take it. That was definitely really, really good news, I thought. And like Chris says, the fact that it's a Wolves game, I hate to take Wolves lightly, because I'm worried about that game just because of this timing. Like after the national break, first
an early game,
early game. Yeah, that's only part probably that worries me about my game, to be honest with you. But still, if you had to pick one game where Van Dijk, if they gave you the schedule and said within the next 5 games, pick one, that Wolves game could have been the one that you picked for him to miss anyway. So that kind of works. Well, speaking of,
I was just going to say, speaking of that Wolves game really quick, and I feel, maybe I'm completely wrong, but it feels like the last 2 years at least, we've talked on the show during an international break, talking about how the next fixture is the early game. And I feel like, does this happen every year for us? I'm trying to remember, because it feels like it does. And I feel like there's just doom and gloom every time I think about the international break, because then I just think of, okay, it's going to be a 6:30 our time game. Like that never goes well. So I don't know, maybe I'm just playing that in my head.
I don't know if it is because of Thursdays, or normally being in Europe, you do not normally get that. I mean, obviously, we know Klopp pitches up a storm. If we do get that when we play midweek, this was a time where, like, well, you guys didn't play midweek, so you're getting the morning game kind of thing. I'm not sure. We'll have to go back now. We'll have the research department look into that for you. I'll get our intern on that. Let me go first find an intern, and then I'll get him on that for you.
Wait, that's me.
Let me message you in the background over here to get on that researching. Yeah, Matip and Gomez were into international duty, so honestly, a lot of players kind of not going is definitely good. I know we like watching, Nunez do well and stuff like that, but in some ways, the club over country thing comes into play. Well, speaking of club over country over here, if you think Poland and Turkey did bad, there's always Germany. Honestly, like I have not, it's almost like kind of like took some time off from it, made it more like an American football weekend instead of a regular soccer weekend. Speaking of, by the way, let's ask over here, are you an NFL guy?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly
very casual.
mostly for fantasy. I don't get bent up about it. I don't really support a team. Like if I had to say that I follow someone, it'd probably be the Bears, but that's not fun for anyone either. So I'd rather not have more negative feelings in my life revolving around sports. So I kind of just detach from that, and I just do my 12 different fantasy leagues or whatever it's at this year, and just say I'm good. The Niners did well.
Yes. I mean, yeah, good weekend overall. I usually spend my Saturdays. I'm not a big college football fan, but I'll watch if it's like an exciting matchup. But I usually spend my Saturdays rooting for the team that's playing Notre Dame, just the NOANG more than anything else, who's a huge Notre Dame fan. And then, yeah, I'm a 49ers fan. So it was definitely a good weekend. So I did take the weekend mostly off from soccer because Turkey played on. Look at that. I'm saying Turkey over and over. It's blending in. Just rolls out the tongue. So they played on Friday, so that kind of like totally opened up. I think they play tomorrow against Japan, who like ends up friendly, who is going around. So maybe we'll get our coach fired too. That would be actually welcome in Turkey right now. So when I saw the score, what is it, 5-1 or something like that, I really thought it was more like Germany's trying things, like they played a totally different 11, like trying all the young guys or something like that. Then I look at the lineups and I'm like, ew, not really. What do you make of that story? Obviously, Klopp's name is going to come up right away, being German and all that, and it's been rumored before. Like Chris says, Nagelsmann is another like person that should come up, and I know it has because he's unemployed, right? But I mean, I still almost feel, I know he's talked about it in the past, but to me, it is not a Klopp job because he does not do well if he does not spend the entire summer with them. There's like, it's not cool. These guys are not here and stuff is all he's going to say. So to me, I don't even think, if I'm German, I would be like 9, I would for nice. Someone says club, because I feel like that's not really his strength. Like he's more like a club manager.
Yeah, and I think he will always just be a club manager, and that's okay. I feel like going just based off of everything you said, there really is no way in my head that it would fit, because I feel like he wouldn't be able to bring in the kind of guys that I think he'd want to play with out of the pool of guys that he has. I mean, I could totally be wrong because I'm not a genius manager, so who knows what he could do. I mean, he wanted Goetze, right, before Salah, so maybe there's just one example of a player that he could have probably worked with that could have made him a little bit better. But I think overall it doesn't make sense, because he is a guy that likes to he's sort of a day-to-day with the players kind of manager. Yeah. There's some managers where they're really good tactically, but they're not going to spend, some lunches around the players kind of deal. There's some managers who are really good friends with the players, but not necessarily good tactically. And Klopp has both. And so I don't think he would be awarded that kind of time with the national team, given how much time is taken up by the club level and then how little of time he has to set up for any international duty. So I think overall it just wouldn't make sense for him. And I did see, this is, I think, one of the craziest facts I've seen in a long time. Hansi Flick is the first coach in the 123-year history of the German national team to be sacked. they have never actually sacked their manager.
Wait. Are you serious?
Yes.
Is it like they're mutually agreed to leave kind of bullshits?
They
Or
resign. There's
okay.
never
Why
been
don't you
a
resign?
sacking in the
So you can get your
123 year
severance package.
history.
Yeah, that's odd. That is shocking, I guess, especially with a place with high expectations, more than anything else. But yeah, I agree. I think he's. I mean, Chris says he's a personal manager, hands on with the players, and the national doesn't allow him that privilege. I think he's more about. Yeah, see, like Saido's already. Saido will rather send Matip and Gomez to Germany before he sends before he sends Klopp over there. I feel like he's the kind of guy that needs to be with the players. He's all about building that team spirit and work as a team and stuff like that. That's why I feel like like that's his philosophy. That's why I feel like he fits Liverpool and the city and stuff so well. Whereas if you're seeing these guys once every 2 months and different set of guys all the time as well, because obviously like that guy is injured, this guy is doing that and stuff like that. So I just don't see him as a good fit for it. Do you think, though? I mean, doesn't matter what we think, I guess. Do you think he would consider it a good fit and would want to do it? I'm assuming definitely not at the time, because he's in the middle of a project that he seems to be excited about.
I think if he isn't at any club, he would do it. It's one of those where if he retires from club management and goes into just national team management, then that would be the best situation. Kind of like Chris is saying, it's his retirement job, because then he doesn't have to focus his time on anything else besides just the national team, and then he can make those relationships work easier because he has more time to be able to grow that. When he's stuck, I'm not stuck. That's a bad choice of words. When he's at Liverpool, he's not able to take the time to build those relationships for all the players who play all across Europe, rather than just at Liverpool. Whereas if he's not at Liverpool and he has all the time, he can build and foster those relationships a little better. So I think it makes more sense once he's out of the club level and just focus just only at national level.
Yeah, because it would be more like, I guess let me take a look at that kind of a thing, that more than anything else, as opposed to like leaving everything and they're like, oh yeah, this sounds like an exciting project. I actually see him more, I mean, maybe I want to, it's a personal thing, but like I see him more interested in the project of building something than he was last year. He seemed like a miserable dude. I know things were not going well, that's part of it, but it just felt like he did not look like he was really, he looked more defeated, I guess. Whereas he looks a lot more hopeful and excited about all the new shiny toys he has to like create and improve. And we can do this, we can do that, and stuff like that. Like he feels like sky is the limit now. Whereas, obviously we had already maybe set the sky with the squad he had. So I don't know. He comes across as a guy who's more excited about the things we can do and the things we can work on and how we can get better and stuff like that.
But I do feel there might be a bit of romanticism in the sense that if Germany has one of these, 2 to 4 year spans where they are just really, really bad again, right? Like before 2006 it was, where they had that stretch where they were just god awful, and the country's like, we can't have this. We need to reinvigorate this entire country to be good at the sport again. Like Klopp could be the national hero that brings them back to the World Cup final deal. So there's that bit of romanticism in the storylines of it, I think, in the future, potentially, if Germany is still a little bit rocky. But I think there's enough talent there where you can get a guy like Nagelsmann and take care of that. You can get there's a lot of managers who I think could take the job because there's enough talent to work there. So I don't think it's like they're not going to absolutely go fall to rock bottom again. But it would be a fun storyline in the future if they are still struggling and Klopp comes in and is able to take them to the heights where they used to be before, or something like that.
Here's the thing, and I don't know how it is in Poland. I think we see it over here as well. Definitely in Turkey. It feels like there's a lot of politics that goes into the selection of the squad. Do you think that's something? I mean, I don't know if that, like I say, is Poland the same way, where you're like, how is this guy here? Probably because of this kind of a deal.
There's 7 guys in in the starting 11 yesterday that probably would not see the squad at all if it wasn't if the manager actually was allowed to just pick 11 Polish players and not have to go off of what they've achieved in their career, it would be completely different. Yeah, so I agree that, and that could be something that keeps Klopp from doing that as well, because if he's not allowed to even pick his own players, then what's the point?
Yeah, because we heard it in US too, like, you know, like have to have so many guys from Major League Soccer kind of a thing, and all those, you know, like mini quotas that they have to fill, or, you know, we should probably call him. He went there, like the dude who was playing left back for Turkey, like he, like, you know, he just went to Valencia and stuff. He's a good player, but like I'm sure we could have really found a Turkish left back as opposed to playing this guy out of position. England is another one. I mean, so it does happen in every. I mean, you know, you have guys who never play for their own clubs. If it is about, like, you know, being in form and being the best of the country in that position at that time, if that's what we were looking for, I don't know if there's any national team like that, and I don't know if Germany is any different. Do you think that in some ways does it fit Klopp because he's used to working with limited resources, like I'll work with what you guys give me kind of thing? Or will it be something that he kind of like frowns upon because it's somebody else poking his? Because when he's in a club, at least he knows what he's got going into it, and nobody's interfering afterwards. So how do you think that like fits him, I guess?
I think that's fair. I just think that you have much less time to work with national team than club team. So while he, in both scenarios, let's say that he's handcuffed to these players, he'll get the whole summer to work with the Liverpool club, whereas he'll only get a couple weeks or a month or so to work with the German squad. So I think in that specific instance, it's difficult because he just doesn't have the time overall to work with either. So maybe, I mean, yes, he could definitely be comfortable having his team picked for him, or comfortable to an extent. He just wouldn't have the time to work with them like he's awarded at the club level.
Yeah, it's kind of like a weird dilemma. Like, I don't know which way he would go. You would think somebody with his experience, I don't want to say ego, but they're part of it is ego, right? Would not want somebody to tell him kind of like what to do when it comes to footballing decisions. It's one thing to say, hey, here's the limits. You got to work within these boundaries. He's like, okay, cool. And then you do everything football. You know, once you select your team, everything football is you. Whereas, I mean, if somebody's saying like, yeah, you got to call Lewandowski, yeah, but I don't want to play like that. Well, sorry, sucks to be you. You have to, he has to be in there, kind of a deal. Yeah, it's kind of a different story. I know if you would like that, and I'm assuming that's how Germany rolls as well. Sparky is my idol, by the way. Just I thought we traveled a lot. Then again, you can't keep up with Sparky must be a spy or something, just doing different projects around the world. Now I'm in Greece. What's going on, Sparky? I'm assuming the weather is nice and dandy over there. So what do you expect out of this international break rest of the way? Do you think it came in a good time for us, or do you think while we were on a high we should have kept going?
There's both sides to it, because I feel like, yes, there was a high, and it was nice to come to kind of to stay at that high. I think we needed a little bit of break overall from just emotions from the first 4 weeks as well, because there were a lot of things that were going on in those first 4 weeks, from the red cards, from the transfers, to just everything just felt like it was always on 10. And so it's nice to kind of just dial that back for a couple weeks. I mean, maybe not everyone, because, you know, like Luis Diaz and Szoboszlai and Nunez and Gakpo, like they all have their duties that they're doing internationally as well. So maybe they're still on that level, which is good to see, because I think for most of what we heard about, or what I saw international wise, level wise, everyone from the club has been playing well, and so that's good to see. I think if the results had gone a little differently, that Newcastle game had gone a little differently, the international break would have been perfect, because it kind of gave you some time to readjust. So yeah, I think it does suck a little bit that we were on such a high, but I think it also allowed the emotions to calm down a little bit from everything that went on for the first couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn about it as well. I almost felt like we like that chaos. Sometimes when we're in that chaos
We
of like,
welcome
as
it.
long as it's
Yeah.
going well, we just keep like rolling with it. But Cersei makes a good point. It does buy Trent some time. Um, and I guess that was kind of like a concern because his backup is the guy who's kind of backing up Van Dyke right now, who's out, and Konate, who's out, and stuff like that. So I don't know who would play there. We can't call Milner back to play these positions that we can't find anybody to play in. So that was probably like, like a concern in that sense. But I almost felt like too that, yeah, while it was going well, I guess the only plus is the fact that we did not send as many players as normal, because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we lost some international players like Fab, Hando, and stuff like that. But I guess, I mean, we're sending Endo, who probably needs more game time, so that's almost like a plus. And I did hear he played really well against Germany, but then again, I don't know how bad Germany was at the same time that they got their. I'll find. I mean, if I watch Turkey's game tomorrow, it will be more to watch Endo than the Turkey, and to make sure nobody from Fenerbahce gets injured. Those will be my two missions in watching the game against Japan. But do you think that kind of helps build like Gravenberg and players like that? Kind of like gets, I guess, vetted in.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anything, a little less mileage for their legs, right? We saw, I think there was the stat going on that Soboslai and McAllister together already have more minutes than Keita and Ox had all of last season combined in the Prem. And so that's like when you think about it that way, it's ridiculous. But you also then think back like, oh shit, the last time we had a team that we ran into the ground, there was a breaking point. But I mean, obviously that's a few years into the future. But yeah, any less mileage is always good. But some of these guys like Saboslai, I just feels like he's never going to stop running anyway. So just
Yeah.
just let him run. Let him have his fun at Hungary. They're playing really well. He had this insane pass. I don't know if you caught the highlight of it, from inside of his own box to the opposite box, and landed right in front of his teammate, making a run down the field. It was just ridiculous. And so yeah, it's there's good and bad, because if you don't have enough guys leaving for international duty, it feels like you don't have enough quality.
Yeah.
But if you have too much, it feels like you're putting too much pressure on the team overall. So it's always a double-edged sword with international players, I feel.
Yeah, that's true too. It's almost like you want to be like, save some of that shit for us at the same time when a guy plays well. But I think for, yeah, like a guy like Soboslai, I don't worry as much. A guy like Ando, I do want him to get more minutes anyway, so it kind of works. Robertson, maybe like players like that, like, and Van Dyke obviously has the ban and stuff like that. So it doesn't feel as normally bad. And maybe because of the time of the season we're in, we're kind of entering a more busy time. So maybe that's partially why. But so we do have to get to this. By the way, my brother, who's, I always talk about as a United fan, was even praising Szoboszlai and is like, man, unfortunately, you guys might have a player on your hands over here. Like, we should have signed this dude, kind of thing. But too bad, so sad. So let's get to this. By the way, I mean, this is how bad United is. Totally unrelated to this. I was reading an article about how they could not. I mean, this is like really simple, nothing like next to this stuff, but they could not sell jerseys of their new striker Hoyland for the last month since they announced them. It has been a month now. They finally might be able to, because their shop did not have the Danish to print. So they had to wait a month. So all these people are like waiting for the jersey to sign for Holland from Wish.com, but they could not find. So they're like a month behind. So I mean, but that makes it almost like a non-story. When you go with this, the thing I want to talk about this, and this is what I want to ask you is, because obviously when it's a United player, now maybe it's because it's Anthony who goes around angry at all times, this story feels a lot more true, I guess, but I don't know. Like, obviously when these allegations come, there's like investigation, there's like multiple layers to this, where United sends their own doctor, And I think United was going to kind of say, hey, you know what? It's your guys, investigation is ongoing. We're kind of like hands off. But then Brazil steps in and says, well, yeah, while this stuff is going on, you're not going to represent us in the national team. What do you think is the best approach to it? Because part of me says anytime there's an allegation, if you kind of take it out on the player, you might be punishing a player that has not done really anything wrong. Because whether we like it or not, while a lot of the stuff is sadly happening, the flip side of it is there are times where, yeah, like pro players are the target of, people to kind of like go after and stuff like that. So we know that happens as well. So like at a personal level, like what would you want your club to do the moment there's an allegation? Do you want him to be like put on the shelf, or do you want to see something before they're put on the shelf, to be fair to him? Like how would you go about it, I guess, if you were in charge?
I think what I would want to do is that, while yes, I mean, I think especially where we live in a system where everyone is innocent until proven guilty kind of deal. So I don't think by taking it out on the player, I don't think that they should be punished, let's say like docking their pay or in that sense, but having them not participate with the team, having them not train, and just having them, I guess, just sit out while any investigation is ongoing is probably the best way to go about it, because either A, found guilty kind of deal, and then you don't have to really do much from there, because then you just go into the next phase of, okay, he was already not playing, now what's the next step of getting him off the team essentially. Or B, if it was all innocent and this just happened to be just some verbal assaults going back and forth, which is sort of what I've seen, is that a lot of it is just some screenshots of just verbal assault going back and forth, is that, yes, they missed time playing, but they weren't necessarily punished to an extent where it's irreparable for them to come back to play. Like, I feel like there would be less hard feelings for the player to come back. Because I think a player would want their club to support them and believe in them, but at the same time, you have to also protect all of the players in your locker room and your image and your fans and your club. And so I think if it's understood that if he just sits out and it goes one way, you take it that way. If it goes the other way, you bring him back and kind of like apologies and let's just get back to it kind of deal.
So it's almost like suspended pending investigation kind of thing the moment it comes out. How serious do you want the allegation to be? Like, obviously you want some kind of proof, not just the hearsay,
I'm,
right?
I'm sure that, and I'm sure there's layers and there's tiers of it. If it's like, oh, he ran a traffic signal and he crashed into a little like post office box, like, okay, like that something like that could be taken care of pretty quickly. But if this has actual like human to human crime or human to, I guess, how do I put it, anything that's significant enough that would require like jail time, essentially, right?
Okay, that's not a misdemeanor.
Yeah. So let's say felony related type of allegations in a way.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair, I think, because I'm kind of like torn on that, because like I say, I do see the flip side of the story, and sometimes when you see like players kind of sport each other, you're like, dude, really, this is the cause you're sporting? I think that's part of the ordeal, like, because they know, but the smart ones know how to kind of like wash themselves. I mean, I always go back to, I know there's a lot of his haters, but a guy like, for example, LeBron, if he has not had anything come out on him, that's amazing on him to be able to manage that, where somebody is being watched 24/7, literally. So like, like certain players know, certain pros know, or hire the right people to make sure they're never in those situations to even come up. So I understand, the kind of like slightly protecting the player too. But so as he says, should each football association take control in situations like this and take away the burden from the clubs? I think that to me, that really opens the door for some more conspiracy theories. So if something happens to, let's say, I mean, we already make all kinds of conspiracy theories with refereeing and stuff like that. So if they step in and say, "Oh, Anthony can't keep playing," but then they step in and say, so and so from this team is banned now for 3 weeks, and one of those games they miss is against United or whatever, I mean, affects the title race or something like that. I don't think the football associations would want to be in that situation, first of all. And it is your employee. I almost feel like they might step in if the club doesn't do anything, but it's one of those like unspoken rules where you're like, well, you guys got to do something, dude, because we don't want to come in and do something. And I always feel like, yeah, United maybe would be like, okay, hands off, let's see what comes out of this, until Brazil. So like obviously that's a total different story though, because it's a different team now. The only reason they're like the Brazil got involved is because of national break. If it was no national break, I don't think they're going to be involved, because he's not in the squad or anything like that anyway. Right. So I would rather not. I would rather have the clubs handle it. It's just kind of like one of those situations where you want consistency, which is really hard in a thing like this, because like you're saying, there's so many layers to each story that you really have to look at it. But I think I agree overall in what you're saying in terms of like indefinite suspension until investigation is over kind of thing, which is kind of like what you really do mostly in a pro environment. Actually, I mean, if you're hourly, you get screwed. But if you're like salary, you're fine. You still get your salary, but you kind of like, why don't you stay away from it and not be toxic? So let's talk about, the group and being toxic kind of thing. Do you think, I mean, obviously this stuff keeps happening with United. Even the United fans are kind of frustrated that what the hell kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is it just coincidence? Is it just their PR not being able to handle issues before they come up? And maybe there are some of these things in other clubs and they're able to handle it better before it becomes news? Or is it just recruiting and not really looking into it well? Hey, look, NFL has people who do this for a living, all kinds of like freaking detectives and stuff like that, and still stuff happens afterwards. So you never really know a guy until you put the guy in that situation. But do you think it's part of recruiting? Do you think it's the culture, like, or just a coincidence that it always happens in the same team over here?
That's a great question, because I was thinking about that in my head as the Anthony news first broke and people were talking about, oh, like here's another one. I was thinking like how many of these players can you actually put in this situation, and all from the same team? Like you think back, I think someone made a post like with Ronaldo and Scholes and Greenwood, and it's just like the fact that it all comes from the same place is just it's a little bizarre. But I think it just has to be coincidence. I don't know. I can't think that a club would be that good at being able to bring in those kinds of people so regularly. It's like almost you'd almost have to try to. And if that's the case, I mean, obviously that's worse than anything, but maybe it is a part of just recruiting, and the culture at the club maybe over the years not necessarily allowed it, but I guess tolerated that sort of behavior, and it's sort of just seeped into the club and it's just been there for a while. So it's tough to say. Honestly, yeah, it's a great question, because I was thinking about it myself, and it's weird because when we think to Liverpool, I can't think of something like this for the last maybe 4 or 5 years. I think Hendo going to Saudi Arabia is probably like the biggest scandal, player personnel wise.
Yeah, and I think that's I guess like a made scandal because of who he is and what he did before. There was a thing with Naby that came out, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, if Liverpool said, Naby, you're out, whereas nothing came out of that and it was just like an allegation, or the Liverpool handled that well and made it go away, and United is not able to. That's the part that I guess in some ways scares me, and not only for Liverpool, but the fact that it keeps coming out of the same club. You find it really odd that it's a coincidence. And you said you could say, like, this is like a genuine question I had. That's why I asked you. Like, you could say Greenwood kind of like grew up in that culture. Maybe he saw this guy getting away with it, that guy getting away. Okay, but Anthony just came in. Like, so it's not really that either. So that's what scares me, I guess, is the fact that maybe some clubs, before this becomes news, makes things disappear, and United can't, because it just feels so odd that it's one after another and after another. And or is it because these are like really significant, so they can't be made to go away because there's so much evidence and stuff?
Maybe more of the latter, I guess, because there is more concrete evidence. But yeah, because I think we look back, it was there has been Mendy, right? There was Sigurdsson, and there was Thomas Partey. I think like really significantly over the last couple of years. But aside from that, there hasn't really been anything else. So yeah, maybe like you're saying, maybe it is a scary thing if other clubs are able to do it really well, because then who knows what else is going on, and what is being tolerated and what is being allowed to sort of just to go on behind closed doors. You would hope to think that that's not going on, but you never know the full extent of anything, and it's weird.
Yeah, Chris says could also be that the lawyers and the Anthony thing jumping on the type of Greenwood, which is, I mean, they might be like, this club is always like this, and then just like jumping on it. But yeah, this is a good point too. Like this, there was a story about going around Klein, and then he did get phased out in some ways. I mean, Trent got his opportunity that way, and then I guess there was no need for him anyway. But then, he did get phased out. I think that's a good way to put it. Maybe some clubs do better in eliminating possible problems before they happen. But like I say, they just literally just signed this dude. So I can see why it wouldn't come up, or it just feels so odd that it's always the same club running into these situations, or it just becomes like a team culture thing. I mean, I know like United fans, obviously, when anything that happens, they blame the Glazers. I don't know what Glazers could have done to prevent the Anthony thing. I don't know what Glazers could have done to the Greenwood thing, unless you're talking about recruitment.
They should have folded the club. It wouldn't have existed, and they wouldn't have been there to do this. That's the Glazers.
Yeah, because I mean, if they sell the club, I mean, these guys are. I mean, obviously, Greenwood is from the system. Anthony's signed for a lot of money to be brought in, and so it's not like they're all different kind of stories too. It's not like, oh, all these guys in the U team or something like that. So that's why to me it feels odd that it is coming from the same source. And I don't know if recruitment has a lot to do with it. I know you want, and we usually go after players that are more established and stuff like that. A lot of captains on this team. I mean, we're talking about, like, I was like, I think I was talking in one of the morning shows, like, we had a chat with my brother in terms of like, we're like, dude, I was like, dude, Fernandez is your captain. So that says a lot if, that's your captain, but we could not really come up with an alternative. Whereas when we were talking about Liverpool, maybe not good enough to replace what we had with Henderson and Milner. But we had so many candidates that we could, Robertson could do it, Van Dijk could do it. We were trying to pick and choose, whereas they really don't have that. I mean, you look at that United squad. Sadly, Maguire is probably the most qualified guy, but he's not good enough to play. So maybe it is partially recruitment then in terms of who you get. It's not like we all have like family guys with 2 kids as a minimum requirement. There's a lot of young kids on this team, especially now. Or is that part of the deal? We were an old team. We got younger. That's when you get problems, because obviously look at all these players. It's guys who cannot maybe control the ego after having early success.
There's definitely a level of and this goes with any sport and maybe in every country in the world that has the opportunity to make a lot of money in these sports, is that from an early age you're given everything. And you're always allowed to do this and allowed to do that, and you're told yes all the time, that you just feel like you're entitled to everything exactly how you want it to. And so if you grow up in that environment and you grow up feeling that you deserve whatever it is that you want and you're entitled to it, then you act on that. Maybe sometimes not realizing what it is wrong all the way. Like there might be part of you that understands this, that like maybe this isn't the right thing to do, but no one's ever told me I can't do this. So I'm going to just do this anyway, because, this guy kept doing it all the time. Nothing happened to him. and I've never heard the word no in my life. And so I think, especially with social media and how much of a spotlight these kids get from 11, 12, 13 years old, potentially, especially in the US, when it comes to like basketball culture now, like there's mixtapes coming out for kids in third and fourth grade. And you're thinking like, this is such a terrible recipe for their life if they're getting so much of this going on that early, that it's only going to set them up poorly, because they're going to go through life thinking that everything is always going to be easily handed to them because they were this huge sensation when they were 7, 8 years old. And then once they have an injury, or once they do something that not everyone agrees with, everyone turns their back on them because they'll just find the next kid. And so I think overall, the culture of finding the next big thing and spotlighting all these young talents is only going to drive these kids to do, I guess, the wrong things in a way, because if they're never told no, I mean, who's going to stop them from doing whatever they want to do?
That's actually that's a really great point, because I've seen it on hand, obviously, with my two girls playing soccer and at like club level and stuff like that. And you see like these ridiculous like parents and tapes and all this kind of like private coaches and stuff like that being done. And this was girls soccer. So it's not like there's a lot of money involved. So when you look at stuff like what you're saying, like basketball and football and stuff like that, where there's a lot of money involved now, even as a college player, like before it was just to get a free education, get a free ride and stuff like that. Now we're talking a ton of money straight out of high school. So I can only imagine how much worse that is if girls soccer that I was in, like watching in horror. And there are like I said, there are like girls exactly like what you're saying, like they're really, really good, and they're never said no to, or they go to a team. They come from a team where they were the best player into your team, and now they're just like one of the players, and they can't even handle that well at that age. So I can only imagine when you're being like third grade, fourth grade. I've seen some stuff, and it's just like, it's horrific. I think it's a sad thing for the kids as well, especially because, like you're saying, one injury and the whole thing can go south. And if that was your entire life, that's when you enter depression, obviously, if your entire life was built around that. I mean, sports and everything is great, but you gotta kind of make sure it's kind of like toned down to a sensible level as well, so you're only getting the good out of it and not the negative.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing with maybe girls soccer in this country is, I guess, to play devil's advocate, there are only so many positions available and so much money available for them, that you want to then, that's why you're trying so hard to make your daughter get all these tapes and be as seen as possible, because there aren't as many opportunities for that sport as something like basketball and football, where there's scouts at every single game. There's parents at every single game, that every player that's there, they're being watched by someone. Whereas girls soccer, there might not be that opportunity to that easily, so that you try and almost overdo it, because there's not that many chances for them individually. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good angle. I know what you're saying. But personally, I think it's still more about parents' ego satisfaction.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's always going to be there. Yeah.
Whereas I think in other sports like basketball and stuff, there's not only the ego satisfaction, there's more about this kid's shooting is our future, like this kid's field goal percentage is our future of our family, kind of thing. Whereas
Sure.
I don't think that's as much the case. I feel like parents in, for example, girls soccer, put a lot more, they're in the negative. I can tell you that if their girl gets, even if they get a free ride, they are in the negative with the money that is put into the travel, the private coaches and all that kind of stuff. They are in the negative. They're not getting a financial gain. And that's why it's kind of like a pay for play sport in some ways, because the parents who are already have the economical status are able to hire those private coaches, hire those speeds coaches, blah blah blah, to make their player better. Whereas I feel like in some other sports like football and basketball and stuff, there is this raw physical talents that they're trying to mold, because they're the way out. They are the ones who are going to bring the money into the family. They're not going to hire a private coach. They're hoping. And that's when I think when these people can be vultures on these kids, because they're like, hey, I'll take your kid to the top.
Yeah.
And because it's like an agents and stuff like that, because then if the kid gets injured, well, I guess I'm not taking yours to the top. Hey, how about that kid over there? And then that's what happens to the kids. But yeah, that's kind of like a sad ordeal overall. And I don't know, like, going back to our story, it is probably part of the ordeal with these guys, but I don't know. Then it would happen with everybody, right? I mean, ultimately, it's up to the person to grow up after a while as they're going around the years and kind of mature. You would think most of these guys would eventually be humbled from being the best of their team, youth team, blah blah blah. They're U21 to when they come to a big club like United, like Liverpool, whatever, and play with other good players and say, okay, I am not the best by far now. I got to do my thing, kind of a deal. But obviously, it doesn't happen. There'll be more layers to come to it. It's just like, I don't know. It's odd that it's one after another. Couldn't happen to a better club in that sense, in terms of like this, like Sancho and all that kind of drama and being out of O's to add to this disaster that is United. But so moving on, obviously not much predictions to make except who is Poland playing. Let's figure that out. They're done.
They played both games already. So yeah,
you're done. That's good.
Yeah, no, they beat the Faroe Islands 2-0 and they celebrated like they just won the fucking World Cup. And all the fans were talking about how embarrassing it was that you could only beat them 2-0. And then they go and turn around and they lose 2-0 to Albania, and that's it. So there's nothing else to look forward to in my life right now for this week. I mean, the sport-wise. Up until Wolves.
I was like, send help. Yeah, like I say, I might browse at it. I might not tomorrow. If I look at it, like I say, it's going to be more to make sure nobody from Fenerbahce gets injured and to see how Endo does. I don't know if Taki is there. I don't know if he made an appearance in the German game. Like I said, I did not watch the game. I just saw the score, and I kind of assumed it was backup Germany playing Japan, but it was not. So as long as we keep Klopp, I guess we're happy as Liverpool fans. But I'll be back tonight with the boys. We'll probably start looking ahead to the Wolves game, see where we're headed there, and kind of like take a look at where we're at as of now. Regular time, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. I think all three of us back together for once again. Bigler will be rejoining the gang. So all three of us will be on live. So meet us then. And then I'll be back again Wednesday morning with the Morning Breakfast Gang. Have a great week, everybody. It is Monday, but what are you going to do? Enjoy your week. See you guys tonight. Take care.